Tubman, The Moses of Her People, Chapter 1, Life as a Young Slave. Harriet Tubman was a great American hero. She was born in 1820. At that time, millions of African Americans were slaves. In some states, almost all of the black people were slaves. In other states, some black people were slaves, and a lot of other black people were free. But the white masters still ran everything and controlled the law. Maryland was a state like that. Harriet Tubman's family lived in Maryland. Her father's name was Ben. Her mother's name was Rit. Ben and Rit were married, but Ben was a free man and Rit was a slave. They had 10 children before Harriet was born. Rit belonged to a white family that owned a plantation. Since Harriet's mother was a slave, all her children were slaves too. The law said that it did not matter that their father was a free man. Back in those days, there was slavery in the southern states of the United States, but there was no slavery in the northern states. A slave could run away to the north and become free, but it was hard to do, and it was very dangerous. The slaves had a hard life. They did not have many clothes, so they could not keep warm. Their houses were small and poor. Many of them had to sleep on the floor, and the floor was made of dirt. They did not get much to eat. Many masters beat their slaves. The children of the slaves had to go to work. They were not allowed to go to school. Some slaves worked in the homes of their masters, but most slaves worked outside on farms and plantations. On the plantation where Rit was a slave, the slaves grew corn and wheat for the owner. When Harriet was about 6 years old, she was put to work. At first, her work would be things like carrying drinking water out to the slaves who were working in the fields. But soon, she was sent away from her parents to live in a white woman's house and work all day for the white woman. One of her jobs was to dust the house, but the woman didn't teach her how to dust. When Harriet did it wrong, the woman just beat her. Harriet also had to take care of the woman's baby at night. The baby slept in a cradle, and Harriet had to keep rocking the cradle to make the baby sleep. If Harriet fell asleep, the baby started to cry, and Harriet would get a beating. Harriet wasn't getting enough food, and she wasn't getting enough sleep. This made her sick, and she was sent back home. When she got better, she was sent to work in other houses, but she always hated it. Sometimes she would do things like steal sugar because they never gave her any sugar to eat. Then she would get caught and they would beat her some more. When Harriet Tubman was older, she started to work outside in the fields. After a few years, she got very strong. She could do men's work in the field. She also worked in the woods with her father. Her father worked for white landowners who had trees on their land. He was an expert at how to cut down trees and sell the lumber for building ships. Harriet learned how to live outside and how to find her way in the woods. She was a hard worker. All her life she loved to work, but she hated being a slave.